Multiple witnesses people saw these phenomena just above their heads, and an entire family thought that these creatures came from space outside an entire airport. Those pilots had never seen anything like that, and also a whole city. They were totally terrified. Phoenix's lights, we know exactly that witnessed an entire city. You must ask how long they have been hiding the O'Hare Airport, Chicago. There will be new information about what really took off. This fact tried to hide the incident that the Kingsville Sun opened new data about what really happened. There was a confrontation for 3 hours. The more witnesses, the more theories. They had no idea what it was. Now new evidence and theories, they will bring us closer to decipher these unresolved mysteries. Sightings UFOs. When many witnesses presence in a mysterious event, the chances of solving it should be much higher, but some incidents even decades are still unsolved. One of these cases was that of a family rural in Kentucky. Kelly Hopkins Bill's encounter is one of the greatest mysteries in the field. Paranormal claimed that their home had been besieged by unknown entities, and there are others. This is the longest encounter between aliens and humans of which you have Constance. Who will the creatures strange who terrified this family were beings from another planet, or new evidence will reveal your true identity? August 21, 1955, Hopkinsville, Kentucky. A group of friends and family gathered at the Kelly farm to pass the day. There were enough people, some children of various ages and also adults with their spouses, and a couple visiting. The men were going to work up to date next and had taken their wives to stay together. One of the men went out to get water out of the pump and saw a saucer-shaped ship. I changed on a hollow on the outskirts of the farm. He saw something between them. Told everyone that I had seen a mysterious ship. Was I don't know what he was, but he was the family taker. Crummy, you have to breathe where I am. Saying that there is something outside. Nobody believed that there would be seen nothing. We saw something flying around. You have to believe me, there is something outside. Give us an hour later the dog put to bark without stop, and men they went out to see what was happening. They thought maybe they had visited, and then they noticed that there were some small strange creatures as a high meter. They had very long arms with spur and long and pointed ears. No, they walked but floated, and Gramilla were terrified and they took the shotguns. There is no other. They came back with your mother. Come on. And there was a confrontation that lasted 3 hours and minutes. More creatures appeared and surrounded the farm. When these entities approached, the windows fired through mosquitoes. Stay there. These people use a lot of cartridges to keep those beings at bay for 3 hours, and the woman who gave the creatures approach said it seemed that they wore their hands aloft. I think the best tried communicate and did not do it in a way hostile. So at any given time while the shooting was produced, I say that they were shooting, that they will stop, because I thought may not be as harmful as others thought. The people ended up retiring and disappearing. When everything, the family reassured, contacted the local authorities and told them everything would happen. Thanks for the police and the sheriff department went to the home and they registered the farm. So much the field says the house only found the holes in the mosquitoes that R had done with the bullets when shooting. They were that great, but no matter how much disbelief that will arouse, the witnesses insisted on what they had experienced, separately described to the same entities, although they did not have time to talk about their characteristics. Thank you very much. They thought these creatures came from outer space because it was the only way they could describe them. It would be possible that they were telling the truth, that the creatures they saw that night were malevolent entities. No humans theory. When non-human entities, you might think they were a group of people who were crazy, without education, superstitious, and that had been drinking brandy, but that's not what would happen that night. Lived the alien meeting. A flying object unidentified landed on the farm that night. The theory discussed by the researchers at that time was that these non-human entities had come out of the ship that had landed in that Hondanada and who had approached the house over and over. As a researcher who has seen evidence enough to believe that he visits us in advanced civilization, what flies in disc-shaped ships that transport non-human entities, I suspect that is what there could be passed at the ranch. They were traumatized by the fact that they had not only seen a ship, but they had witnessed the progress of some creatures that could not understand things that had not seen before, considered something so impossible that were willing to attack because some feared for their lives. Creatures did not look like anything that would have seen on this planet. There is nothing that has spur or long claws and eyes like that. I have interviewed more than 1,000 affected. If that is so, they have given that description again and again throughout the years. I have investigated similar cases. At the same time in the 50s there were reports on humanoids like these in France and South America, so there were cases all over the world. Strange creatures similar to dwarfs. Some had very big eyes, other long beards. This is documented, and it was a period with many humanoid sightings. Humanoids are creatures and bipeds with creatures that resemble a human being but not too much. In South America there were humanoid reports. They were hairy donaxes. We have reports about humanoids with very different in some parts of the US and also in France, although the way in which the humanoids in general are bipeds with large eyes and unique features. For assumption, the first thing we want to do is to rationalize what and look for failures in the testimonies of those who see them, are something that I have seen again and again. People were spending a night nice with your family and friends. Not I think they went to invent a history like this, had to face the public as Carnio, and the final had to move because there was people had installed in front of his house to get benefit. They did not want to take advantage of. Another proof that families saw alien beings was the interest that showed by the case a high-program government secret called Project Blue Book. U.S. Air Forces in that time had a program created Blue Book Project specifically to investigate UFOs, something like that would attract attention, and of course they would take a look. Why not? Dr. J. Allen Jamie, who was the Astronomical Book Project advisor, Blue, conducted an investigation of this event and decided to declare a no identified in the files of the Blue Book Project. The farm that read or can solve another theory. This mystery of decades ago. I spoke with a state police that was on the scene, and he told me that I thought the story had left a bottle. The girl in Hopkins Field incident is one of the aliens meetings more famous in history American, but many experts, they believe that you cannot trust the testimonies. It was the story of Hopkins. Bill Kelly is a study on stupidity. Some call them extraterrestrials, others they say they are elves in Seville. To place them, there were 11 people in a farm, and the situation could get a little complicated because they had been drinking. I talked to a state policeman who was on the scene and told me that I thought the story had left a bottle theory, 2 Chinese stories, and in fact the next day the researchers saw beer cans in the garbage. But because extraterrestrials, if we look at the time, for a few weeks before this event it had been released a science fiction movie that is called Back to Earth, and that there was in it a sting monster with great eyes that bothers people and threat. It seems to me that it is a classic case and that science fiction plays a role to create this type of stories. I saw something flying out, and I have no doubt about that these people had seen that movie. When someone proposed the idea, everyone would say what fun if you expect but something you can see every day. And another, in my mind there is no doubt that the case Mop Kingsville was a hoax. I think that this story were invented to getting notoriety. Seems to me a case classic, and I don't want to be offensive with this because the motivations for deceive or spin jokes are quite complex, but sometimes it is the idea that the world nobody wants to be someone. Sometimes this kind of thing is seen in small rural communities when someone becomes the center of attention with a strange story and the people approach them and invite them to take something at the bar. Everyone talks about this and it's something great. I think that in a rural community, if a family says that something has happened to them, the police are going to go. So I don't think there is something especially problematic with that, and not I think the fact that the police valid will investigate the experience is what would the police do. The communities rural are famous for being formed for very, and I think quite an idea rooted by example. If the patriarch says they are going to do one thing, everyone pays attention to him, and especially the children of the home strict will not put but what they are told to do. And if someone says that they will tell a story using the science movie fiction that just released on a monster to spend a joke on friends of the people will do it. I have heard that there are people who suggest that movies science fiction are being used to acclimatize people to a reality extraterrestrial, that are giving us information with droppers for prepare for a great end, and do not I think a word if this were true. They have been doing it since the 40s or 50s, and that makes no sense. Also, if they try to acclimatize the people and indoctrinate, the message would be unique and clear, but not in some science fiction movies. There are hostile extraterrestrials is that they invade us and are monsters of Siltone's eyes, but in others they are good. As this theory does not have sense because movies cover a very broad spectrum, but and if these families and that there were seen something could be another explanation for what they saw apart from being non-human entities. I think there is no doubt that they shot to the soul at the height of the first figure that they saw. It was Metro 20. That is not much for a monster. If they were inventing a fear story for me, that was significant. If we review the elements of the description, I believe that the creature was an owl with ear theory 3 cornudos. Corning owl is one of the most birds great of this type with a Great Lanus is native to America and its population in Kentucky, where the alleged encounter took place. Extraterrestrial is considerable. Could being this what they saw? Describe some cornudos owners called points of similarity. The cornudo owl has the very long ears, or to be correct, cephalic binacles, have their eyes very large, and when he lifts his wings, if come in front of the account, seem in 5 fingers. But this raises the question of what is the explanation of the flying saucer that they saw before seeing the owls. I think he saw a bright light cross the sky and disappear after trees is the typical description of what happens when you see a meteor. Throughout history we have heard talk about very normal selves. I don't think that was what they saw that night. These people, in which who is here because we don't know about none give or not with travel in ships of high technologies. So what happened really that night of 1955 can that we never know, but the witnesses they insist that their experience was real. 40 years after the event, I choose Kingsville. To more than 3,600 kilometers from there was a mysterious event that would go down in American history like the sighting of one more UFO. Massive, they described them as 6 points of light equidistant among themselves. They were all kinds of conspiracies. Asked what happened in 1997, there was an event in Phoenix that has gone to posterity. Thousands of inhabitants witnessed the formation of strange lights that moved slowly by heaven on the city. God, my, this mysterious event. Now know how the incident of the lights of Phoenix, one of the most mysteries incredible of modern times, is the mass sighting of lights lights in Phoenix. People saw something unusual and did not know what was it. We have to ask ourselves how much time have been hiding what the incident of the lights of Phoenix. It was the one of the lights of Phoenix, the larger massive sighting of unidentified flying object of the human history, or will offer us the last tests. One more explanation. Shocking. About 8 in the afternoon of March 13 of 1997, some inhabitants of Phoenix, they saw something strange that flew over the city. Witnesses described 5 or 6 amber color lights that formed a huge UFO. Said it had more than a kilometer in diameter. Overwhelmed Phoenix slowly and saw him. Thousands of people. If that is hello. We have received several calls in the National Center of UFO Denunciation in Washington, D.C. that collect UFO sightings. Received no less than 700 calls from altered eyewitnesses. Had never received so many calls for one sighting since it was formed in 1974. A witness was so hit by who gave his medical consultation closed to discover the truth about this inexplicable event led me to start a trip to try to find a logical source and meaning. 6 points of light totally equidistant with each other by more than kilometer and a half wide. These orbs gigantic. These light balls seemed to be linked to boomerang or triangle. I tried to simulate everything mentally. Had an oval shape like an egg onwards into uniform amber color, but not they dazzled anything. I felt forced to document the I took photos while all that happened, raised slowly and then moved in synchrony until disappearing after mountain. That had no explanation. What is that? The story became even more strange when later that same night the same phenomenon without explanation reappeared on Phoenix. In reality, incident occurred in 2 phases. 8.5 people saw it. Brilliant. You've seen it. In the second part of Phoenix lights occurred to the 10 o'clock at night. There were 2 episodes totally different, and it was so disturbing that in the morning next when I woke up I thought there should be a logical explanation for this, and I began to make calls. Dr. Lin met with government officials, but they remained perplexed. The photographic tests of the huge V-shaped ship with luminous orbits were more interested my photographs, so I asked them. They were silent, and one said more to know that they should know what's in our airspace, but not they had no idea what they were not. They appeared on the radar. That is, the Dr. Lin interviewed other witnesses that they were sure that what they had seen was not from this planet. Would be possible that Phoenix's lights were one or several extraterrestrial ships. Theory 1 alien ship. I think the ship that people describe I had a triangular shape that would suggest that it was an extraterrestrial ship. There was very credible witnesses or the real estate agents who were in an area with stakes on the floor. The ship that they saw just over more than 2 kilometers wide. The people who saw these phenomena just over their heads, they saw some gigantic wells or what they called energy containers rotating, did not reflect the light, and some they saw that these orbs separated from the ship itself and then they returned to attach it. Some saw that these ships took off at full speed without disperse. The air did not even do no noise. Our solar system only has some 6 billion years as a system, very young. Solar. There are scientists who have raised the theory that there could be intelligent entities that are thousands of millions of years ahead of us, and if so, it is reasonable to think that have found a way to come to visit us. Is true that the lights of Phoenix were an extraterrestrial ship, and neither the government nor the army disseminated no information on the subject as they will try to cover up. It was there were rumors and conspiracies everywhere. I asked what was happening, and almost there was some hysteria in the community. Governor Fire Symington gave a wheel of press, came out and answered the question about UFOs, telling them the following: now I can reveal to the culprit, and he took out your own chief of the cabinet dressed in extraterrestrial, and evidently for assumption that people laughed became a joke. And strangely, years later the Governor Symington admitted that I had also seen Phoenix's lights. Fire Symington came out and said he thought that it was real, that it was true, that all that I had some supernatural. If the confession of the governor is authentic and Phoenix's lights were a ship extraterrestrial because he waited so much time to make it public, they will probably contact him and they would say that I had to keep it in secret past many officials of the government with all this phenomenon because some authorities feared that panic spread. But there could be another less strange reason for thus covering it from Phoenix's lights. They could have a more alarming origin. They wanted to study people's reaction to see how I would answer and if it would spread panic of the thousands of inhabitants of Arizona that witnessed the strange lights about Phoenix in March 1997. Many they believed that the ship was of origin extraterrestrial, was something real, was a UFO. Triangular and kilometer and a half wide. They overwhelmed an area metropolitan and changed their lives to tens of thousands of people. But it would be possible that there was a more earthly explanation. On July 24, I received a call from one of the chiefs of the International Guard, and he told me that he thought they would know what they were. The lights, I answered, like this great they were, and she told me, you think that in all these months no one has reviewed the National Air Guard records? That must be what people saw, and that was what he told me in a surprising advertisement. Only 2 months after the alleged sighting, the Army made its discoveries that they had seen were part of a routine military exercise in the area of Phoenix. Was not a ship extraterrestrial. Theory 2 military flares. Phoenix's lights were a mystery. Genuine. At first people saw something unusual and did not know what it was, but when they examined the evidence it was sure scientifically that the first phase was Air Guard. Flight Maryland National that was performing maneuvers. The second part of Phoenix's lights that took place at 10 p.m. was when some airplanes arrived in training and then launched some flares and parachute. The second event almost certainly included flares. Resolve this: the mystery of the lights of Phoenix, the strange light orbs that saw thousands of people at 8 p.m. It was the National Guard that was flying off Phoenix and then at night launched lighting flares. It is very common for airplanes to release flags with parachute to plan longer. Scientifically, it is clear that first phase was a squad that came flying and the second the launch of the end of the case. Who tells the truth? Whereas the Army lighting flares, or as thousands of witnesses affirm, was a ship extraterrestrial, or there is the possibility that the lights of Phoenix were a social experiment. High secret military theory 3. High social experiment secret. I believe that Phoenix's lights were from ours. It was a ship that we had designed and developed, not a ship alien. Now we have advanced so much that we could produce a ship like that they saw in Phoenix and could form part of a high secret project. Reason why I think the ship Phoenix lights probably was one of ours and was created by humans on Earth is that if you examine some declassified documents, there are many delta wing shaped ships or triangle that already exist since the years 40. Now it is known that the Army American has invested thousands of millions of dollars in an aircraft experimental with high propulsion technology and energy systems of Vanguard. Many military aircraft, they have a triangular shape, and that is for a reason. They fly at very high speeds that requires a lot of strength, because if not the wings would come off. In many other sites have been seen aircraft triangular with lights below making different types of maneuvers. If it were an American ship secret, the question would be, because the Army was going to fly it about a big city where it would be so exposed. What happened to Phoenix's lights was a social experiment. The Army wanted to see if you could fly on a great city without trying to knock him down. If they could do it there and get out of his zone, could do so in any part. If that was possible, then they had a very powerful weapon that could use to spy on countries, foreigners. It is amazing to say that the inhabitants of Phoenix were used as bunches indies by participating unconsciously in a high-secret social experiment. I think the one who will pilot it would have orders of following the city in silence and observe the reaction of the people to see how he responded. And yes, panic spread, but neither the government nor the U.S. Army have responded to the statements of the experts about a military aircraft of high secret, and surely never do. The media silence has not served to stop Dr. Lin in your mission of discovering the truth. 22 years later, I'm still looking for it. It was very easy to give an opinion about what they were Phoenix lights, because I don't think the one in Phoenix lights would not be the last mass sighting of a UFO. In Chicago in 2006, something mysterious appeared about its international airport that hit everyone. Several members of the land personnel and of flight saw an object. Planning only lasted 5 minutes but basically changed the lives of millions of people. On November 7, 2006, there was an extraordinary event at the airport O'Hare of Chicago. Several employees of airlines claimed to see something that it flew the sky on the clues, and everyone stared at trying to find out what was. There is no explanation for what happened. They tried to hide what was the mysterious object that they saw. About the airport would be an extraterrestrial ship, as many say a military vehicle, or new tests will reveal an even more explanation. Baffling. Chicago, November 7, 2006. O'Hare International Airport is the third with more U.S. traffic, with direct flights to more than 217 destinations from everyone. But 4:15 in the afternoon, something appeared about the airport that was not in its planning. Earth staff were moving a plane at a door and saw what it looked like, a gray album that was planning under a layer of straight. The people saw a saucer-shaped ship flying over the terminal. For 5 minutes everyone stared, thinking that day and that it should not be there. The luggage modes and pilots said they had seen something without identifying just about the door. 17. What was the witnesses passed that the disc-shaped object was about 500 meters above the airport. After a few minutes the object disappeared. Suddenly he shot at tremendous speed, crossing the clouds and leaving a huge hole in its path. These pilots had never seen nothing the same. Was something incredibly unusual. If there is an unidentified object in an airspace of an airport, international is the problem. They had to suspend operations for a while to find out what was there. Indications about what to do if you see a UFO on an airport. But although there were multiple witnesses, those responsible for or in the armed forces denied that there was something unusual in heaven that day and it was real. People saw it and in consequence tried to cover up. Airport authorities prevented that the photos will be published. They assured that the pilots and air controllers did not give official testimonies in public. Pilots thought it twice before to speak. They worried that the airline could throw those who saw pilots and land staff in the sky. That worried so much to authorities to cover it up. Theory 1. Extraterrestrial is it was a very large and metallic object with flying saucer shape, probably outside an extraterrestrial ship. I think Gore's object was an object unidentified flying. All witnesses said the object did not emit any sound, and that turned the people saw that is important, and they said it has to be extraterrestrial because I had not seen it. Never. I don't think it was anything about our planet. Proof of this is the speed at which the ship flying after planning the airport calculates a speed 600 meters per second. Go from 0 to 600 meters per second equals Mach 2, twice the speed of light. If you pass from 0 to 1900 kilometers per hour, you would crush a force of astronomical proportions. That aircraft, I could do that if the ship had an extraterrestrial origin, because this advanced alien species would have chosen one of the most greats of the world to rebel. They wanted us to see them were presented, and they said, here we are. The airport, or International, is the third airport with more U.S. traffic, and although this ship only showed for 5 minutes, hundreds of people saw her. Would like aliens that we knew they were visiting us, would want the world to understand that they have developed advanced technologies capable of doing things like planning and fly to space to great speed. Many believed that this supported demonstration technological was considered a threat, little subtle by authorities. Government could explain what they covered him up. They don't want the public to scare, they want the public to know that there is things in the sky of which not even U.S. government or other government I could protect us. I think the Army knows that there are extraterrestrial ships here for years. What they know and what they say, they are two different things. There are several agencies within the government American with information about UFOs, but not everyone is convinced of that. What witnesses saw about the airport here was a ship extraterrestrial. Could the last tests demonstrate your true origin? The U.S. is not the only country with technology. Advanced aerospace, this was promoted in American airspace, was a group that wanted to make a statement of intentions. November 7, 2006, multiple witnesses claimed to have seen an extraterrestrial flying saucer flying over the O'Hare Airport, Chicago. Many believe that the government is covering up, but and if it were an OVNI, extraterrestrial ship obviously means unidentified flying object, but that does not mean that it is an extraterrestrial ship. But we don't know what is. New tests could reveal that what the pilots and staff saw Earth was not from the outer space but a more earthly enemy. Theory 2, unknown enemy aircraft. The U.S. is not the only country with technology advanced aerospace. We have to worry about poaching of Russia and China. It is very possible that keeps several tricks in the sleeve. Is quite reasonable to believe that these two countries also have programs advanced. They would not be impossible for them to send a recognition device strategic to our airspace. Some experts believe that the ship O'Hare could have been an attempt to the other countries to demonstrate their higher technological capabilities. I think it was an attempt to acclimatize. They wanted this object to see it a lot. Credible witnesses want to teach it in a sensitive airspace because you can fly an aircraft on an airport. This thing was imposed on a space-controlled American air, and is interesting that people will not be scared more to invade airspace. But he raises a question because he didn't go to recognize the government that an enemy foreign had raped its space air. Admit that there is a technology there outside you do not understand, or you are not capable of managing, is a problem. When admits is a weakness, the enemy knows that he can take advantage of it. But both the Russian government and the Chino deny being responsible for the ship, or so if it wasn't the ship of a known enemy that witnesses saw planning on the airport here. Day, I think there is an explanation conventional for what happened in the airport, an unusual weather phenomenon but perfectly explainable. Theory 3, meteorological phenomenon. In fact, after carrying out a research, the armed forces concluded that the circular object that had been seen about O'Hare was no more than a hole in a cloud. Several witnesses mentioned that there was an Ave-shaped hole in the clouds about O'Hare. The first thing I thought when I heard this history was that it looked a lot like a formation called Sky Punch, and the truth is that it is not something out of the common. Can be seen almost in any part of the world any day provided the conditions occur adequate. But that November day 2006, the conditions were perfect for the formation of these clouds. A level of clouds in the strata cools for below the freezing point of the water, and then if something goes through the clouds as an airplane leaves something that I know can condense water and freeze, forming ice drops, falls, the cloud layer extends to a circle and for a while hangs by under the cloud as if it were an album. Gray. In the first versions nobody saw how the album left, assumed that first A saw it later, and after there was a hole in the clouds, so something had pierced them in the first place. Physics does not work like this. If a huge album will cross the clouds, would be a spiral current and not a huge hole in the clouds. With so many witnesses, we know sure that something happened at the airport or here in Phoenix or Hopkins built. Only time will say it. The truth will come out in light and will make the facts the speculations.